Yo, 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 YouTube! What's up? I am here to give another game review. Before I get into the review, though, just have to say, I've been feeling pretty shitty this last week. Like, my depression has intensified to a point it hasn't been for about 7 years, back when it was at its worst. And yeah, things suck. I just feel crappy all the time. But life still goes on, and one thing that I always keep doing is playing games, no matter what. I'm always playing something, and making little game reviews is a nice little distraction to keep me from dwelling on very dark thoughts, which I have a horrible tendency to do. So, that's why this review is coming from me to you right now, for anybody who's watching. And also, you might notice I'm in a weird place. I'm on the floor of my apartment right now, for no particular reason. But let me ask you this. Have you ever seen a game review brought to you onto your computer over the internet from the floor of a depressed PhD student? Didn't think so. Novelty. I'm bringing you novelty, and I'm doing it just for you. See, look at this authentic floor experience. I've got credit card ads sent in the mail, and I always just toss them on the floor over here because that's where I put them before I end up finally putting them in the garbage. And yeah, it's a pretty authentic floor experience. So let me get on with the review. The game I'm reviewing is Dragon Quest VIII. Dragon Quest VIII for PS2. From like 2005, I guess this came out in. I am aware, and will also make my viewers aware, this game has a 3DS version that was released sometime, I don't know when, probably the last 5-10 years. And I guess that version has a few changes, some would call improvements maybe, but I like to play the original game whenever I can. Like, I always prefer playing original games, always. So that's what I did. So let me tell you about my experience with Dragon Quest VIII. So I will go through the pertinent areas of the game, as I usually do, starting with story and characters. And what I have to say about the story, or the setting, of Dragon Quest VIII is that it is like a classical sort of fairy tale fantasy, if you will. It's just got all of the cliche elements you would expect from that sort of story, which we see in JRPGs. You know, everything from your curses to your knights and princesses and wizards and evil entities who want to dominate the entire world, etc., etc. You've heard this thing before. You know exactly what I'm talking about if you've played any of these types of games or heard any of these stories. So it's cliche and formulaic in some ways, but if you like that sort of thing, if you enjoy that sort of setting, that sort of theme, then this could be a great story for you to enjoy. Some other notes, though. So, a curiosity about this game is it is very British to the core. Like, the entire theme of this world is sort of mirroring and emulating, think, like medieval British fantasy, that type of thing. So you've got the accents right from the opening cutscenes with the voice acting, British accents, heavy, thick British accents, and just even like the pastoral landscapes and the castles and everything. Like, it just screams British medieval history, like that sort of setting, only with fantasy elements, of course. So it's not badly executed, the Britishness. It's just to me it felt a little overdone and overbearing at times. Like why so British? Like, why are you being so British right now? That's kind of how I felt on occasion. But anyway, other things to note about like the story. It's got a pretty unique premise, despite the stereotypical setting. Like, your party has a pretty unique mission and cause, and the conflict that is set into motion right from the start of the game is something unique that I haven't really seen any stories in other games be similar to. Like, I don't even need to say anything about it. Just know that it's unique. Like, you can look up synopsis and summaries of the story if you want, but it's unique. It's not. It's not like. It's just unique. Take my word for it. I also want to say just a few things about like the characters. So there is pretty decent and nice character development for everyone in your party. It's like a party of 4 basically, including your character. Like each character goes through a good little arc of development and growth and overcoming personal challenges or hang-ups from their pasts. But there is one character who is lacking, and that is your character, the protagonist, because it's one of those blank slate situations where your protagonist character you play as is pretty much silent. He doesn't have any dialogue in the game. It's just you kind of clicking yes or no when people pose you questions. That's what you do as the protagonist in this game. You don't have, like, this main character does not have a personality. There's no personality there, or like definition, or like there's just nothing. Like, they just leave him a blank slate. So if you're okay with that, then maybe it'll be okay. But to me, it really just stood out amongst all of the other very well developed characters there are surrounding you, the main character, and just seemed kind of weird and sort of interfered with my sense of immersion, I would say. Because, like, I want the character I play as to be more invested personally in the plot, and just didn't feel that way. But anyway, yeah, there's great humorous moments. That's one thing I have to compliment this game for. It's got some great humor. I laughed quite a few times. There's some funny moments for sure, although a lot of the dialogue was a little boring to me. Some of it a little boring, and the story as a whole didn't thrill me, because it did feel pretty generic in a lot of ways, the way it developed and the way it concluded. There wasn't much of note that was memorable to me, and I wasn't all that particularly motivated to move from one plot point to the next along the story. So I think that sums up what I want to say about story and characters. A lot to say there. Moving on to gameplay, there is like a pretty classical model of gameplay in Dragon Quest VIII of having like a big 3D overworld to explore with a few vehicles that open up to you later in the game, different modes of transportation. Yeah, great overworld exploration, you know, moving between towns and dungeons that you can see on the world map and travel to. And there are also very convenient spells and items that let you just instantly teleport to places you've been before, so that's great. Great overall model of the exploration, I think. Other great things going for the gameplay. Dungeon length was spot on, I thought, like really good. I never felt any dungeon was too short or too long. They never got just like stale or feeling like this should end now. Like, the dungeons felt like the optimal length. Optimal length, I would say, dungeons. Other things I had to say, though. So, I did beat this entire game without any guide reliance. Like, I never had to look up a guide or look up how to go to the next part of the story or anything. I figured it out all on my own, which I'm always happy to do. I think it's a very good thing a game has going for it if a player can do that and not have to resort to guides. But some players, some games, you know, some just aren't compatible. Sometimes you just can't figure them out. Anyway, the challenge of the story flow and direction following, though, was still there. Like, sometimes it was a little unclear or mysterious what you should be doing, and I had to sort of search around, and you have to trigger certain characters by talking to them to make certain events happen, etc., etc. So, a little cryptic at times, but not bad. There is one gigantic, huge problem I have with the gameplay, though, and to be honest, this is the deciding factor that sort of killed this game for me and made me not enjoy it overall, and that is there are considerable, enormous chunks of grinding that are pretty much required to progress through this game, or at least that is what I found in my experience of playing through the whole thing. There were just these certain roadblocks of challenging bosses I could not beat. They just kept killing me over and over and over again. And like, it would completely halt my progression through the story and require me to grind, I kid you not, like 10 to 20 hours probably on a couple occasions in this game, one of which being one of the boss fights very close to the end of the game. One or two of the boss fights, actually. So, yeah, it was such a hassle. I mean, I normally don't mind having to do a little grinding in these games, because I've just gotten used to it over habitually being forced to do it by so many of these old JRPGs, because they make you grind quite often, but this felt overboard and more excessive than anything that I'm used to putting up with or believe I should have to put up with, and it just killed the experience, because when the story just stops and you have to go put on some video on your headphones while you hammer away a button on a TV, letting your characters grind through random battles, you know, just trying to keep yourself occupied by watching some crap on YouTube, like that's not fun to me. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, I want a game to be so engrossing at all times, if it can, that, like, I don't want to focus on anything else while I'm playing it. And, yeah, we had the antithesis of that going on with the grind fests in this game. So, not good. Not good. It makes you actually, like, forget where you even are in the story and what you're doing. Like, I was, at the end of these grinds, I was like, okay, I'm leveled up now. I'm strong enough to go on. What am I doing again? What am I doing? What? I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Like that's what it was like. Ridiculous. Also, one last little note on the gameplay. Much like some plot elements in this game, the boss fights were formulaic in that the bosses have well mapped out sequences of attacks and healing moves, etc. that they use. Like, there's a set pattern pretty much for every boss in the game, and they just cycle through it over and over again, and it's just a matter of, can you learn the cycle of moves they use, and can you just withstand the damage they deal out and be able to deal enough damage back fast enough to beat them. And it just kind of got a little boring, to be honest, in the boss fights for me, because I have formulaic. I like a little bit of chaos, like a little bit more of a chaotic element in my boss fights, to be honest. Like, when bosses, like, throw out crazy random shit that you do not expect at weird times, I think that's kind of fun and thrilling. So, not happy with these boss fights. And that reminds me, I forgot one thing. Going back to the story, you know, getting back to the theme of formulaic things in this game, it's kind of a weakness in the game, I thought. Later in the plot, like, there's a certain plot device that gets reused and recycled in a very lazy way, where, like, it's just one chapter of the game has its own little enemy and premise for how they got their powers and how you need to stop them. Moves on to the next chapter, and you find out it's kind of just recycled in the same. And then you move on to the next chapter of the game, and you find out, oh, it's still recycling and reusing the same concept. Like, come on, like, get over yourself. Get on with it. Get a new concept for what the conflict is and what the bad guys are doing. Like, do something new, you know? Like, do something new. They didn't do that. They should have done that. So, that's all I have to say about that. Also, there's just a lot of random magical bullshit that happens in this plot. I mean, it's like, oh, the super magical bad awesome guy that we can't defeat has now gotten even more power and we can't defeat him. How are we ever going to defeat him? And it's like, then what happens is, oh, there's a magical fairy that just got a whole bunch of new power from out of nowhere, and I don't know how the crap that happened, but now we can beat this new super strengthened bad guy with this fairy's new power, and ooh, wow, that's really cool. Like, that's kind of how ridiculous it is. I'm not using hyperbole that much here. Like, it's a lot of magical random bullshit. It is, it really is. But if you don't mind that, if you like that, you know, if that's your thing, you know, you might not mind it. Okay. Let's move on to some lighthearted things, like the visuals and audio of this game. Its presentation, its aesthetics. So, beginning with the visuals, I don't have too much to go on about here, but the game has beautiful, vibrant, varied visuals. Like it's a very nice, beautiful world to explore. There's a lot of variety in the scenery you see. Mountains, forests, snowy tundras. Like, it's a pretty nice game world. Huge ocean, of course, that you can explore a little later in the game. So the game world looks really nice, I thought. Pleasant world. Sort of on the cartoonish side, maybe, as opposed to the realistic, but it fits with the fairy tale, fantastical atmosphere. Like, that's exactly the type of presentation of the world visually that you want merging with that type of lighthearted, sprightly story, you know? Battle visuals were okay. They didn't impress me a ton. Like, they're just like normal battle visuals to me. The spells look okay. It's okay. Also, nice character models. I think, if I'm correct in remembering this, the guy who did the Dragon Ball Z artwork, you know, the Toriyama guy, he did the character design for this game, and it's very obvious, very clear if you compare the two franchises. Very obvious. You can see the character models being his unique style, and I'm okay with them. I think they look pretty good. Although, I do have to say the monsters, the monster design is a little weak. I thought the monster design was just a little weak in this game. A lot of them just look really weird and silly, which I think is probably just a Dragon Quest thing. based on the screenshots I've seen of this series. This is the only Dragon Quest game I've played, though, so I do want to say that. My first game of the series. And also the monsters, a few of them, like, you'll see that thing game makers do where they reskin, like, the monster's model and just reuse it in a different place later in the game. You see that happening quite a bit, so that's a little lame. On occasion you do see a pretty cool looking monster in this game, though. I don't know, monster design's an acquired taste. Like, some people might be okay with these silly looking monsters in this light-hearted fantasy tale. I say light-hearted, though, but there are some dark things going on in this game. It is a little bit darker and more adult in some ways. I mean, there's death going on, so there's that. But I think I want to conclude and wrap things up here, just talking about the audio a little bit. So yeah, let me just moisten my own throat here for a minute. Okay, so for audio, it needs to be said, I think, that this game has some terrific voice acting, and quite a bit of voice acting as well, which I think is pretty impressive. Like I mentioned those British accents from before. I'm by no means an expert on what a British accent should sound like, since I'm just an American, but they sounded pretty authentic and good to me. Or at least the quality of the voice acting sounded good enough that I just thought the vocal performances were great all around. All the characters, I thought, delivered very great lines. Definitely great voice acting all throughout. Just a good spectrum of emotions communicated, and just, you know, it just sounded like good voice acting. You know, it just sounded real and moving and believable. Whether it was humorous moments or serious moments, like, it was just good acting. And I want to leave off on a positive note for audio again with just addressing the soundtrack, because this game has such an amazing soundtrack, really, for what it is. It's like, it's a fully orchestral, like, acoustic sounding soundtrack. Like, there's no electronic influences or more modern things in there. Like, it's just, you know, the orchestra with the string sections and the horns and the flutes and the clarinets and the various percussive instruments. It's just like a really high quality full orchestra that is providing the music and all the areas of this game, from the overworld exploration to the battle sequences to the sad moments to the happy moments to the intense moments in battle. Like, it's all just beautifully soundscaped by an orchestra. Like, those emotions and that sort of dynamic range of musical atmospheres, if you will. And it kind of reminded me, like, it reminds people of probably different things, since people have different experiences, but for me, what it reminds me of is, it makes me think of fond days of my youth, getting to, once the holiday season rolled around, go and see the ballet. Like, there was a local ballet in my little town I lived in, and I would go see their annual rendition of the Nutcracker, and there would be all, like, the classic songs that are, like, you know, classical orchestra songs, like in the Nutcracker soundtrack, and, like, it's of that same kind of quality and nature. like a ballet's soundtrack. Like, it's at times bombastic and bright and cheerful, and at other times sort of beautiful and evanescent and eerie. Like, it's that sort of range of dynamics and overall quality that like you find in some high art classical shit. You know what I'm talking about? Like, it's good. Very good music. So that's pretty much all the specifics I got to address of Dragon Quest VIII. Would I recommend the game though? To be honest, I personally wouldn't. Like, it took me 100 hours to beat this game, and a lot of that was very frustrating grinding, and like if you were to graph my frustration of the game and level of wanting it to end over time, like, okay, here is the y-axis, that is that level of frustration. Here's the x-axis showing time. Here's me as time goes on. Like I didn't enjoy it at the end. I wanted it to end pretty badly. Now, it is possible you might have an easier time with this game because you are a more skilled video game player than I am, and you might not require as much grinding because maybe you know how to do all the little tricks and craft all the special items that give you all the perks and advantages you need to just sail right through super easy. But I wasn't into it. I didn't enjoy trying to figure out the crafting system. I just didn't get that into it, and I just wanted it to end. I just wanted it to be over. I just wanted to be free from the burden of having to continue grinding and playing the game, to be honest. But that said, opinions are subjective, and the game still had a lot of good stuff going for it. It had some nice aesthetics, some great humor, and there were some moments that were very entertaining and amusing, and I'm glad I got to get those moments. But that's all I got to say about Dragon Quest VIII. Peace out.